So today we're making a sweater. I think, yeah, I've been teasing this since like October. I think that's when we were supposed to have done the live, and then things happened. And well, now it's December and we're barely getting to it. So yeah, let's just do this thing. To make this, you're gonna need a size 3 lightweight or DK yarn, whatever you want to call it. You will also need a 5.5mm Tunisian hook and a 3.5mm regular hook. Here's a look at the measurements you're going to need to take. Now the shoulder, bust, chest, waist, and hip are going to be taken in the round, so completely around your body. You're also going to need to take your sleeve length and then the circumference of your arm and the circumference of your wrist. The PDF pattern for this project is available in the shop. I'll put a link down in the description box below. To construct this sweater, you're going to need to create 3 parts. One, which is the whole vest of the sweater, and then the 2 sleeves. Your initial chain is going to determine your garment width. You're going to crochet the whole back panel. Then you're going to do the increases to create the shoulder panels, leading up to the front panel, and then you're going to do the 2 sleeves and sew everything together. So let's take a look at the stitch. This is called the gentleman's stitch. I did film a whole tutorial for this. We're going to do a quick review, but I will link the tutorial for this stitch down in the description box below. Now, because this isn't exactly a beginner project, I'm just going to let the camera roll here while I do the initial chain and just kind of talk you through the process. After you've taken your shoulder, your bust, the waist, the hip measurement, use the measurement that is the widest. So whichever one of those 4 is the widest measurement, take that measurement and divide it in half. Now, to that half, you are going to add 1 inch or 3 centimeters to that measurement, and that is going to be your garment width. Your initial chain will need to be crocheted in multiples of 4. Okay, so now let's talk about the stitch. Once you've made your initial chain, you are going to need to crochet a foundation row. Now the foundation row, you just insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You repeat this with every one of the chains of, or the stitches of the chain. And then once you complete your chain, you're going to work a regular return pass. Now your regular return pass is going to be used throughout this entire project. For the return pass, you're going to yarn over and pull through 1, and then with the remaining loops of on your hook, you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. This stitch is a 1 row repeat. So you're going to use your foundation row and then row 1. So for row 1, you're always going to skip your first vertical stitch. You already have it on your hook. Now you're going to use the front and back legs of the stitches separately. So beginning on this second vertical stitch, you're going to insert your hook behind the back leg of the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop for a back loop simple stitch. The next stitch, you're going to insert your hook behind the front leg, and this is going to create a Tunisian simple stitch. Now you're going to alternate between using a back loop simple stitch and a regular Tunisian simple stitch using the front leg of the stitch until you complete the entire row. When you complete the row, you're just going to cast on into this final stitch and then complete a regular return pass. You're going to repeat row 1 until your fabric measures your garment length. You're going to need the garment length measurement. So for this, just measure from the top of your shoulders down to your hip along the front side of your body. Make sure you account for any of the curvature you've got. So if you're making this for a gal, you're going to need to account for, bust, or if you have a baby bump, account for that as well. And that will determine the length of your garment. So repeat row 1 until you reach whatever that length was. This is going to create the back panel. Next, we're going to have to create the shoulder panels. And for this, we're going to need some increases. All right, so you are going to measure from your neck to your shoulder. This is going to determine the width of your shoulder panel, and then you're going to place some stitch markers along the top part of your back panel. Just like you see in the photo, you're going to place your stitch markers, one on the edge of the fabric. So right where you see the 2 little pink stitch markers, you're going to measure from there towards the neck or towards the center of your back panel and mark where your shoulder panel ends. Then you're going to do that on the other side. Be sure to count the total number of stitches of the shoulder panel so that both shoulder panels end up matching. Once you've marked out where your shoulder panels are going to end, you're going to count the stitches between the 2 shoulder panels at the back of the neck, and you're going to divide that in half. Place a stitch marker at that center point, which is that yellowish greenish stitch marker you see in the photo. This is going to help you determine where you're going to end your increases at that shoulder panel so that you can join the two parts at the V in the front panel of the sweater. So if you are right-handed, you're going to begin with the right shoulder panel. If you're left-handed, you will begin with the left, but I'll show you that process here in just a moment. You're going to decrease every other row, so cast on one row of just a row 1 repeat, and then for row number 2 and every other even numbered row, you're going to increase just like I'm going to show you here. So using this final stitch of the row, insert your hook behind that first leg of the 3 that make up that final stitch, and just Tunisian simple stitch. Then you're going to cast on into that final stitch of the row. So just insert your hook behind those 2 side legs, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And that was it. So increase every other row. Repeat rows 1 and 2 until your panel measures half of your garment width. The left shoulder panel is going to have the increase at the beginning of the row. Now you're going to complete a row 1 repeat, and then at row number 2 you will begin your increases. The increase is going to be done using that second vertical stitch of the row. So back loop simple stitch, and then you're going to do a Tunisian simple stitch right after using this same vertical stitch. So all of this is on vertical stitch number 2. So back loop simple stitch and then front loop simple stitch. For the rest of the row, follow the sequence of the stitch. So if your next stitch is a back loop simple stitch, then crochet that as a back loop. If it is a front loop, then crochet that as a front loop. My gosh, I'm getting all tongue-tied. So just follow the sequence of the stitch. It will even out every other row. So when you do your regular row 1 repeats, just continue to follow the sequence of the stitch and you should even out just fine. And just like you did with the right panel, you're going to repeat rows 1 and 2 until this panel measures half of your garment width, at which point you're going to pin your garment together and you're going to try it on. So complete that last return pass, pull up a loop, and place a stitch marker here at that last stitch. Make sure you pin both of the panels together just like you see here before trying your sweater on. When trying this part on, make sure that you can slip the sweater comfortably over your head. Then you're also going to pin just below the under part of your arm, so the 2 sides together just like you see in the photo, and make sure that you have a comfortable fit around your chest, the bust, or any other part of your body before continuing on to the rest of the sweater. Once you've made any necessary adjustments, you're going to insert your hook through that right panel and then also through the left panel. Using the loop that you had for your return pass, just chain 1. That's going to make a small knot here at the bottom. You can go ahead and cut your yarn, pull your yarn through, and now you've joined the 2 center parts. To complete the rest of the front panel, just repeat row 1 until the front panel from the shoulder part to the bottom of your hip measures your garment length. Once the vest part of your sweater is done, it's time to move on to the sleeves. To avoid having a lot of space between the vest and the sleeve, you're going to crochet the sleeves separately and then you're going to sew them onto the sweater. Take the measurement of your arm circumference and add 1 inch or 3 centimeters. This is going to be the length of your initial chain. From there, you're going to crochet 11 rows. You're going to decrease on row number 12. Now the decrease is quite simple. You're going to skip a stitch at the beginning of the row and skip a stitch at the end. So I'll show you right here. That second vertical stitch, we're going to skip it. We're going to go into the third vertical stitch, and always keep in mind the stitch itself. So continue the sequence of the stitch. So if that first stitch, or I guess it would be vertical stitch number 3, is supposed to be a back loop, then crochet it as a back loop. And then you crochet the rest of the row following the sequence of the stitch. When you reach the end of the row, you're going to skip the last vertical stitch and cast on into the final stitch of the row. From here, you're going to complete a regular return pass. Now for the rest of the sleeve, you're going to complete a repetition of rows 1 through 12. So rows 1 through 11 are just a row 1 repeat. Row number 12 is your decrease, and then you're going to repeat this until you complete the length that you need for your sleeve. If you're going to be using a different yarn weight, the PDF pattern includes notes for how to calculate the decreases in order to adjust the width of your sleeve. Now moving on to the cuff of the sleeve, you're going to need to switch to your 3.5mm hook. I'm using a Tunisian hook because I don't have a regular hook in this size, but we're going to move on to the bind off. Now for the bind off, you're going to cast on a Tunisian simple stitch using both legs of the stitch. You're going to pull up a loop and you're going to close this as a slip stitch. So pull the top loop through the bottom loop and you're going to be left with just 1 loop on your hook. You're going to repeat this in every vertical stitch of the row. So Tunisian simple stitch using both loops or both legs of the stitch, and then slip stitch by pulling the top loop through the bottom loop. When you reach the end of the row, you're just going to cast on into this final stitch and then just slip stitch so that you're left with just the one loop on your hook. So this is what your bind off is going to look like. Now you can stop here, but I wanted to add a few rows of half double crochet, so I'm going to begin with a chain 1. I'm going to turn my work around, and then if you look at the stitch, we're going to use the back loop of the stitch. So here's the top of it, and the back loop is going to be this one right here, so the one closest to your face. To crochet a back loop half double crochet, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop of the stitch, and this is the first stitch of the row. Then you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop so that you have 3 loops on your hook. You're going to then yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops so that you're left with just the one loop on your hook. You're going to repeat this in every stitch of the row. So again, you're going to yarn over, you're going to insert your hook into the back loop of the stitch, then you're going to yarn over again, and once you have 3 loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over one more time and pull that through all 3 loops. When you reach the end of the row, you're going to do one last half double crochet, chain 1, and turn your work around. Now this is the front of the stitch, and then there's the top part. So we're going to crochet into the back loop of the top part of the stitch. And you're just going to repeat the same process we did before. So it's just a half double crochet in this back loop, beginning from the first stitch of the row. And now for the final row of the cuff, we're also going to be using the back loop, but this is the top of the stitch. Here's the back side. We're going to be using the bottom loop on the back side of the stitch. We're going to begin with a chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet into this bottom stitch. Now the chain 1 I'd already done at the end of the previous row, so that's why you don't see it here, but chain 1 and then begin with your single crochets. To single crochet, you just insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through the 2 loops on your hook. When you reach the end of the row, you're going to single crochet into that final stitch, and you're going to end the row with a chain 1. This is going to make a small knot at the bottom, so right down there. You're going to cut a long tail end of yarn. This long tail end is going to be used as the thread to sew the bottom part of the sleeve as well as the side part of your sweater. So I'll turn the work around so you can see the front of the cuff. Now this is what that'll look like with the 2 rows of half double crochet and that last row of single crochet. Now the last thing we have left to do is to stitch the sleeve onto our sweater and then to also stitch it along the bottom side. So we're going to fold it over like this, and that's what your sleeve is going to look like. Now to line it up with your sweater, if you left all your stitch markers on there, which I probably should have mentioned that, you're going to use that to line up the center part of your sleeve, both on the shoulder and on the actual sleeve itself. So you're going to fold your sleeve in half lengthwise, and then you're going to find the centermost stitch. So just kind of try to line it up as best as you possibly can. You're going to need another stitch marker or a safety pin for this next section, but place it here at the centermost stitch. And then you're going to go back to your sweater, and you're going to look for that shoulder panel, stitch marker. So open it up like this, and then if you left your stitch markers, it should look like this. So line up your pink stitch marker, although I don't know what color you used, but I used a pink one. So line up the stitch marker from the sweater to the stitch marker along the top part of your sleeve. Pin these 2 together, and then you're going to pin the sleeve to the rest of the sweater. At this point, it is a good idea to fold your sweater in half so that it looks kind of like it would if you were to wear it. What you're looking for is that the bottom hemline, so the corners of the bottom of the sweater, that those line up, and that the sides and the bottom part of the sleeve also line up. So everything from the cuffs of the sleeve to right below the armpit to the very bottommost corner of the hemline should all match up. If they don't, try to move the sleeve around so that everything lines up. And, do this before sewing so that you don't have to take everything apart and re-sew it again, because I've done that and it really sucks. So line it up before you sew. Now to sew the sleeve, I begin at the cuff, which is where I left the long thread of yarn. I'm just going to do a quick stitch at the corner or at the edges of the cuff and then just go from there. So since this doesn't require a lot of explanation, I'm just going to leave the camera rolling. I'll play some music in the background and you can just kind of watch how I stitch it together. This is the same stitch I'm going to use throughout, well, the rest of the project. Once you've finished sewing the sleeves and the side of the sweater closed, it's time to move on to the neckline. Now the neckline and the hemline are going to be very similar to the cuff. The only difference is that the neckline has this like V-neck, and we're going to be using single crochets to create a clean edge instead of using the slip stitch, bind off. So you're going to work in the stitch right after the point. So don't crochet into the point, go into the stitch right next to it. You're going to insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and chain 1. From here, you're going to single crochet into all of the stitches along the side of the neckline. The back is going to be a little bit different, so just go to the all the way to the shoulder, crocheting single crochets as evenly spaced as you possibly can, as this will determine how clean an edge you're going to end up with. When you reach the back of the neck, you're going to need to crochet a bind off row since, as you can see here, all of our stitches are still open. Now the bind off we're going to use is very similar to the bind off that you used for the cuff. The difference being that you're going to be using a single crochet instead of a slip stitch. So you're going to insert your hook behind the 2 legs of the stitch, just like you did for the sleeve. And then once you have the 2 loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops. Once you complete the side of the back part of the sweater, you're going to go towards the front of the sweater and join it back towards the V using a single crochet just like you did for the other side panel. Once you finish the neckline, or at least the whole row of single crochets, and you're back at the point of the V, you're going to begin with a chain 1, you're going to turn your work around, and then we're going to begin the rows of half double crochet. Now in order to create a nice sharp point, you're going to skip the first stitch of every one of the rows, and you're going to begin your half double crochet in the back loop from your second stitch of the row. You're going to repeat that for your second row of half double crochets. You're also going to begin with a chain 1, skip a stitch, and then begin as of the second stitch of the row, and you're going to do that again when you do your row of single crochets. So once you have completed all of those, you're going to stitch the V together, and that'll give you a nice clean front of your sweater. Now for the hem of the sweater, you can do the same process I did here for the neckline, or you can just crochet this in the round. This is also going to be just the row of single crochet since you don't need a bind off, and then you're going to do the 2 rows of half double crochet and a row of single crochet. And this way everything will match the cuff of the sleeves. Now if you're going to crochet this for a gentleman and you don't want to have a bit of a tunic look, kind of like what I did here, you would just sew the sides of the sweater all the way down to the bottom corner and then just crochet the hemline in the round. I wanted to have a bit of a tunic look, so I left about 2 inches or 5 centimeters the bottom part of the sweater without sewing, and then I followed the same process that I did for the neckline to create like a V stitch. And then at the corners, which is the only different thing, I crocheted 3 stitches in the cornermost stitch just to give it a bit of a curve, and then I sewed along the center part just like I did for the neckline. But there you have it, the tutorial and pattern for the gentleman sweater, which, you know, I teased since like October. But if you'd like a copy of the PDF pattern, you can find that in my shop, as well as the yarn that I used to make this thing. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.